Hey everyone, Katie and Sergeant Steele here, and today I am very excited to talk to you about something that I love doing, and that is running your own events. And what do you need to think about and do to make sure that those events are successful? So in case you're wondering, this awesome shirt I'm wearing is from Militarum Murphy. I'll put a link down in the video description below where you can get these awesome shirts, and I have a cool discount code that you all can use to get this. I especially love this one because the latest big event that I ran was actually the assault on the Agrippina system at Adepticon. And so I'm so glad that Military Murphy was able to hook me up with this really cool shirt related to that. So thanks, dude. Super appreciate it. And definitely go check him out. He's got some amazing designs on there that also have some very retro, cool Astra Militarum references. If you are interested in running a Warhammer event, there are a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself, and maybe some others, in order to plan for that event successfully. The first thing that you need to ask yourself, and honestly, just you, what type of event do you want to run? That is really important because if you are not going to enjoy running the event, your players aren't going to enjoy participating in it as much as they could. So making sure that you run events that you want to run is key. Now, just because you run events that you want to run and then say the players don't enjoy them, that's okay. Because think about what other types of events or what type of critical feedback you can get to make them better for both yourself and the players that are going to be involved. So those are things that you can look at in order to adjust what type of events you want to run. And I'll get more into the types of events in just a moment, because there's a lot of information to unpack there. And I'm going to also expand on some of the terms that we commonly hear about types of events. But the most important thing outside of that is then your logistics. And these are absolutely critical questions that you need to ask yourself and the people helping you or the space that's going to be given to you. First, how many tables do you have? What's their size? Do they fit the gaming mats that you're going to use? Are you using 60s by 44s or 6 by 4s? Or are you using 30 by 44s? All of this makes a difference for the amount of space that you're going to need. So look at the table sizes, look to see how they fit. You got to put two together. Are you going to have to lean over the tables in order to access your models and the terrain and so forth? How many of those do you have? Do you have sideboard areas so players can sit down their books and their models and their other tools that they're going to use for the game? Or do you need to encourage them to bring like a rolling cart with them because there's limited sideboard space at your event? Chairs can be an okay way to supply extra space for players to set things down, but it's not ideal as things can often be bumped off of chairs or, worst case scenario, accidentally sat on. So you want to try to have a side table and sideboard area where people can set stuff down. I think that's really key. The next thing is about the gaming surface itself. How many gaming mats do you have? Are they boards? What's your terrain situation like? What's the quality level of it? Are players going to want to play on that type of terrain? Are they willing to pay to have the experience on those tables and the terrain that you're wanting to provide? How are you going to get the terrain there? Do you have enough time to put it all together and paint it if you don't already have it? If you don't, do you have backup terrain that you can use to fill in the spaces that you need to put down on the table? These are all key questions to talk about the logistics of your event. Do you have event tokens? Do players need to bring their own? What about packets or cards? Do they need any other special tools? What I would recommend is get a list of these questions. Find out your space, go look at it, take a tape measure, measure things out. Make sure you have at least 4 to 5 feet between your tables, so that players can walk around and also stand back to back, right? Think about it as the phrase of a 2-butt kitchen. You want a 2-butt gaming area. So 2 players can be back to back over different tables or walk past their tables comfortably. So this way they're not knocking models off. They're not bumping books or terrain and things aren't falling on the floor. And so they have a good experience. You want to make sure that that's happening always. It's about the player experience. So now that you've figured out how many tables you have, what size they are, size the space you're going to be using. How do those tables fit in the space, your gaming mats, and your terrain? And do your players need to bring their own tools, or are you going to supply those for them, such as packets or cards or tokens? Put all that together in a booklet, actually. Go on Google Forms or something and type out a quick little 1 or 2 page document that helps explain that to your players, more particularly about what they need to bring and what they can expect. This is really important so players can look at the event ahead of time and understand if it's something that they are looking to participate in. Good things to note on there is about the type of event it's going to be, what the terrain might be like. Are the tables going to be themed and narrative? So you could expect a few tables with very big open areas. Or maybe there's a couple that are really tight, narrow urban areas to fight within. Or are they going to be more match play layout with these little tiny sheets underneath of your buildings to indicate a larger boundary beyond the actual walls of the terrain themselves? These are all things that you want to put in there. And then to tell players, hey, bring your measuring tape, bring your rule book, or make sure you have the Games Workshop app downloaded. And make sure you bring your own objective markers, because we don't have enough to go around, and a pencil so you can fill out your score sheet. Let them know what they need to bring with them and set them up for success. I participated in an event once in which we literally didn't have to bring anything, not even models, which was wild to me. The event organizers did everything for you. All you had to do was show up. They handed you the data sheets and the models, and you played with them. And they were all set up very thematically. Provided, I think that was a very strange experience, but I enjoyed it in the end and I had a lot of fun with it. So shout out to those folks who ran that event. If you know who you are, had a great time with it. It was a neat experience. So next, after you get all this outlined, the other thing you'll want to put in your packet, what you need to decide for yourself, is what kind of event is it going to be? There's a lot of things that you can tack on here. And I'm going to tell you right now, step out of the box. It is not what you think it has to be, nor is it going to be maybe what you intended. You need to be very clear with your players and with yourself about the type of event. So to help narrow that down more, I want to talk about how things are on a spectrum here. So we have casual play, which can be all the way from like beer and pretzels, and maybe you're really loosey-goosey on the rules, to very tight matched play, competitive play, and then everything in between. I myself actually am somewhere kind of over here where I'm a little bit past casual play, because I do like to be very tight about the rules. I think the rules are the framework in which we have fun and enjoy the game in, and also to make sure everybody has the same social contract when they show up to play their games. Because if all the rules are the same to us, then we know what to expect, and we know how the game's going to function, and we can set ourselves up for success and having fun and being able to play to the missions and have a great time with the opponent. So I'm more over here just generally in my preference. Casual doesn't necessarily mean narrative. Like competitive doesn't necessarily mean matched play either, although oftentimes that's interchangeable. But I want to just make sure you are aware there's a spectrum in here. Another good example towards the other side of the casual play is if you've ever attended the at Adepticon, they do the friendly. And this is different from friendlies at other major events. So this is different from Las Vegas Open or anywhere else you might have done it. The 40k friendly at Adepticon is extremely loose on the rules. For example, in 2024, the theme was Back to the Future. So it was based on the 3 Back to the Future movies. And at one point, they just stopped all of our games and said, hey, guess what? We're going back to the past. And if you are in turn 2 or later, you now go back an entire turn. You're now in battle round 1 or battle round 2 or 3. Wherever you are, go back 1 battle round and then continue playing. It was complete pandemonium, along with a lot of the other custom rules they had in the mission packet that we were using. And so with that, it wasn't about necessarily the tightness of the game and making things fair and even. It was about the player experience and about the community experience. And so with that, the players had to be okay with the rules being flexible on the fly. How did we handle scoring? How did we do this and that? And you and your opponent just kind of mostly figured it out. That's what I'm talking about with like casual play and how that could be versus kind of tight competitive play. Okay, so look at that and think about how you want your event to be run and how you want to make rulings yourself, or how you may want to customize things for your own player experience. Now, beyond that, because those two things, casual and competitive, can apply to everything else I'm about to say to you. Next is your actual mechanics and your actual game type beyond that. And what I'm talking about with Warhammer 40,000 in particular is, are you doing combat patrol, boarding actions, crusade, matched play, open play, or your own custom rules and missions? All of these are fantastic options to do both casual and competitive. You can do it all with those things. So pick what you want to play. And this is the decisions you got to make. What do you want to run as an event organizer? Do you want to do competitive combat patrol? Do you want to do casual boarding actions? Do you want to do some casual match play? That could get interesting, even though the rules are really tight there. And the match play format with Tyrannic War, Pariah Nexus cards that we currently have in 10th edition as the recording of this video. You could do some casual elements, such as maybe there's special terrain rules involved with it, or special mission rules that you add in. Or maybe you make rulings as you walk around the room and you let certain players resurrect models and other ones get blown up by a meteor strike, or a vortex bomb goes off and wipes things off the table. There's lots of different ways you can handle these things. And that's what I'm talking about. Casual play could be pulled in with the match play format. So maybe the players draw their match play cards as they typically do, and you come around and add some of these other elements to add to the experience in a way that you and your players want. You could also look at Crusade. Now, Crusade, I want to stress this too. Crusade and narrative are a Venn diagram. They overlap, but they're not necessarily the same thing. Crusade is a set of mechanics that allow you to build an army that levels up and changes. Maybe they get battle scars and they get bad wounds, or they get great relics and cool buffs in their battle experience to fight better in the future. That's Crusade, and it's a wonderful way for you to write your own custom narrative army and to build that army over a series of games. I think Crusade works best with about 4 to 8 players. That's my opinion. However, I have been at events with well over 50 players doing Crusade. I've also run my own events at my local friendly gaming store with over 30 players participating in Crusade at a single event, with 40 to 50 players in the overall series, as I've run it over about 6 to 7 month period. So Crusade is one of those options that you could use. And I think the mechanics in the 10th edition Crusade rules are a wonderful set of rules. I also think for you as a campaign master, potentially, to run a set of Crusade events, so players get multiple games in there. That's where Crusade works best. If you're going to play a series of like 4 to 12 games, or even more, you can use the mechanics in the Tyrannic War and Pariah Nexus Crusade books. And there's some really great stuff in there to help you out as an event organizer to do that. I've been doing it now for years, even back in 9th edition, and I highly recommend it. My players really enjoy it. I enjoy it. It makes it very easy to set everything up and to move forward. Now, outside of those things, right? So we talked about combat patrol, boarding actions, Crusade, match play. The next thing is custom games. This could be a lot of different things. It could be maybe it's your own take on narrative play. Maybe instead of using the kind of more complex and very paperwork heavy Crusade rules, which is my only downside to those that I want to point out, you can come up with your own custom way of telling a story across a great campaign on a planet or in a system or in a whole subsector, even if you wanted to. Maybe every table is its own planet. It has its own special rules, and you write that. And then every table has its own custom mission, and players rotate and they get redeployed to different planets and battlefields on those planets, and they get to experience all those different rule sets. And maybe instead of leveling up and gaining all these experience points and scars like you do in Crusade, instead, maybe you're gathering rare resources and accomplishing certain tasks. And that then unlocks more of the narrative or changes the missions in the future or helps determine the victor and whether it's a team or an individual. So these are all different ways that you can customize these things for your event and still make it narrative without it being Crusade. Like I said, Venn diagram, they overlap. They don't have to be the same thing if you don't want them to be. They can just be related. One of the ways you could do that, in Pariah Nexus, there's this great element of gathering Blackstone material. And that's the way that you work through the missions in order to determine like the victor or whether you get special relics and so forth. And you could take mechanics like that and just use those without all the other Crusade rules. And maybe the only thing you do use is the gathering relics. And maybe that's the really cool part that your players get to participate in, is their warlord gets this amazing Blackstone saber that can just slice right through Space Marine armor. And that's very exciting. So there's all kinds of different ways you could write that. What I would recommend if you're going to do custom rules, which I often do in all of my events, try to make your missions one-pager. Try to make it so that the conditions for scoring are very straightforward. I recommend doing something like doing primary scoring, such as holding 1, 2, or more objectives than your opponent. It scores you 5, 10, or 15 points. Then I often add in a second or third mechanic. Usually the second one is more battlefield and narrative related. So it's like, oh, you're here to gather fuel. So you need to go to these specific points on the battlefield, whether there's objective markers or fuel canisters you've laid out. And you have to perform like an action, give up your shooting or something, look at the new action mechanics that are going to be in the Pariah Nexus match play mission cards. Here's where you can pull for match play to build your custom narrative rules or even inform your own custom Crusade rules. Use those action mechanics to then determine how you gather the fuel. And then as you gather fuel, that scores you points and you score that. And then I often throw in a great thing that I've learned from the Nova narrative. If you've never had to experience that, it's one of the greatest narrative events in the world. I swear to it, the terrain, the missions, and the event organizers are just phenomenal. They like to do a secret campaign where you have a secret thing that you and your team have to accomplish. Normally, it's something as simple as the secondary missions out of the match play card set. That keeps it really simple. So even if your players coming to your event aren't familiar with a really deep, complex narrative system, all of the mechanics I just described there are pretty straightforward, actually. And so they can dive in, get a sense of a narrative game for custom rules that you've written, and be able to understand the mechanics because you're just pulling from other sources and just kind of merging them together. And then also give them a nice, simple score sheet to help with that as well. So make it so like, oh yeah, you're scoring from your objectives, you're scoring from the secondary mission, and then your secret mission down here. And maybe put that on the back and, you write it down secretly and then score it. And you don't announce it until you score it, typically with like the secret missions, if you're using a mechanic like that. And there's other things you can do too. Maybe instead of secret missions, you use mechanics like, oh, anybody who finishes a game with their warlord at the center of the table and the enemy warlord not within the center of the table scores an extra 15 victory points, because this is about asserting your dominance and King of the Hill style play for this mission or this battlefield or this planet. And that's the theme we're going for right now. And that's another cool way you can customize your rules for your events. So now that you know the mechanics and the theme and the general vibe that you want to run, put that in your event packet too, and make that clear to the players and get that to them. And then run your event. Do it. Put it out there, invite people there. Think about your time management. It's the only other thing you got to think about. All these different things I talked about, combat patrol, boarding actions, crusade, match play, and your own custom missions, all need different time allotments. So as you're working through that, think about, combat patrol and boarding actions can be very quick. So do you need like 45 to 60 minutes per game? That's pretty reasonable. If you're talking match play and crusade, you may need anywhere from 2 to 4 hours per game, not even counting your breaks like lunches or just bathroom breaks and so forth during your matches. If you're doing custom missions, that could also look any number of ways, like 2 to 4 hours that you may need for each game. So think about when your store or your event space opens up and closes, when you need to set up, when you need to go in. I often go in for a 30-person plus event. I go in 2 hours beforehand to set up my mats and terrain. And I usually ask some of the players at the local club to have the tables arranged in a general pattern ahead of time to help me set up quicker. You also need to make sure you have space to set down all your materials that you're handing out to the players. So there's a clear station where they come and report their scores. You hand out rules packets. You hand out tokens and pens and pencils, or you do lost and found and so forth, all at a central location. But definitely make sure you plan for time. You also need to plan for teardown time. And basically, you almost want the same amount of time that you've done your setup for your teardown. So 1 to 2 hours, depending on the event that you're running. There are ways that you can speed that up, and that's all based on the context of where you're at, what you have, and what you're trying to accomplish. But make sure that you give your players plenty of time for the experience you want them to have. The more casual you want it to be, the more time you should give to your rounds. So I recommend, if GW says 3 hours and you want it to be really casual and you want everybody to have a great time and finish all their games, round 5 fully completed. Because remember, some people do that in an hour and a half. Some people do it 3.5 hours. Give them 3 hours. Give them 3 hours or 3.5 hours to play through that game, right? So I do think the GW recommendations and the rule books for the timelines are really good if you are hyper familiar with the rules and you can play efficiently. So the more casual you want to make it, or the more intro-friendly you want to make it, the more you need to pad that time out a little bit. Then also make sure you give them time between games to socialize and get snacks and drinks and so forth. Support your local gaming store. You want to shop around for 40k racks? You can't do that if the store's closed. So give them a little bit of time to be able to do those things. Lastly, I just want to talk about maybe what you're charging. I do charge money for the events that I run, and typically it's a very small fee that with my local store, the agreement is we just give that right back to the players in store credit. So it supports the store because the money's guaranteed to go to them eventually. And it helps the players because, let's face it, we all love buying plastic bottles. We love buying paint supplies and brushes and wet palettes and so forth. And so all that money can be used for those things. And so it's a great way to kind of give back. Our local match play league that I'm currently participating in, which is not run by me, but another group of players in my store, they're charging a fee, but that fee is going both to end prize support at the end of the season and for monthly giveaways that they're doing, and to improve the terrain and gaming mats at the store. And already in just 3 months, they've raised enough money to buy multiple gaming mats from Table War that we're going to be putting in the store. So they're working on ordering that now. I'm very proud of them for running those events and doing so successful with it and being able to give back to the community that way. And we're going to be able to use those gaming mats and terrain in both the narrative events that I run and the match play league that they're running. So really awesome way to support the community. But think about the fees you're charging, what they're going towards, and the agreement with the space that's being given to you that you need to work out there. I do not make money from any events I run. So if you're thinking about getting into events to make some money, I'm sorry, but that's not really the case. You're really doing this for the community. I don't know anybody who runs Warhammer events and really makes any money off of it, except for a very, very rare select few who run some pretty significant kind of luxury events, right? And even they mostly just break even. They don't actually take anything home from it. So most time you want to think about $5, $10, $20 entry fees for a lot of these things. If you go to a major event like Adepticon or Nova or Las Vegas Open, you might be looking at paying upwards of $40 or $60 just for your ticket. But you can expect high quality terrain, hopefully well organized events, and other like-minded players almost guaranteed at those events who are traveling all across the world and country to participate in those. But make sure you're charging a reasonable amount and think about what you're doing with that and be transparent with your players about what happens with that funding. I think that's all I have for today. I don't want to dive too much into each of those different 40K game types. I just want to make sure you're aware that You could pick between any of them or all of them. Do a combination. I did an event once in which it was Titanicus and Warhammer 40,000 and Kill Team, all in the same event. You had to rotate between them. And that was I'm familiar with the systems and could do so. And it was a lot of fun. But think about which of those you want to choose and what you want to run and get familiar with them. Definitely do some practice games yourself to be familiar so you can address the rules and questions that may come up from your players. But other than that, have fun, right? That's the goal of this. We're going to have a great time. You're going to run the event you want to run, and your players are going to enjoy it too. And I think that's well worth it. So keep that in the back of your mind the whole time. Is everybody having fun? Is everybody having a good time? All right. That's all I have for you today. So, as always, have fun wargaming or running your wargame events. And remember, Cadia stands.